Hi, this is Lindsay Oden, Special Research Assistant at the Washington State Attorney General's Office, and this is your AGO Moment in History. In this series, our office will be releasing clips from our Oral History Project, an ongoing effort to collect and preserve the history of the Attorney General's Office as told by the people who have worked here over the years. In this episode, former Deputy AGs Jeff Goltz and Shirley Battan interview former Attorney General and Governor Gregoire. Gregoire served 3 terms as Washington State's Attorney General from 1993 to 2005. In this clip, Governor Gregoire describes her transition back into the AGO and how she managed the office as it continued to grow. In particular, she discusses attorney salaries, establishing the Solicitor General's office, and increasing accountability within the office. Let's take a listen.
And so you were elected and started back with the AG's office in '93 after being gone a few years. Did you find the office different or the same? And if it was different, how had it changed in those few years?
Well, see, we were still growing. Remember, this is the time frame when we're really growing. And I think, if I'm curious what you think, but as I look back on it, I think we grew gracefully, but growing like that is not easy. It really isn't. And so it put some real strains on the office, but the office identified the strains and immediately would go to try and address it and resolve it and so on. From the AG Academy to any number of ideas that came forward.
It was a question of systems keeping up with the growth.
Yeah. And then, systems keeping up with the growth and the legislature's always going to underfund the kind of infrastructure for an office. And when particularly they don't have anything to do with the Attorney General's office, they're not particularly sympathetic. So we were struggling a bit, but I don't mean it as a criticism because we were handling it, but it was a challenging time.
So one of the issues that was, this kind of goes back before you became Attorney General and you were deputy and continues, was AG salaries. I mean, I recall some massive efforts to bring some parity between assistant AGs and their counterparts in other public sector offices.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about the strategy behind that, both perhaps when you were a deputy and then later on when you were the Attorney General.
So I ultimately, when I was out at Ecology, I had hired a consultant to help me with some administrative stuff out there, and ultimately decided that we had to look at this from a little bit different lens, and that we needed to be able to prove to the legislature that it was costing them money disproportionately by not keeping the salaries up, that we were vulnerable because we couldn't attract, we were vulnerable because we couldn't retain, and what a travesty it was at what we were having to handle, the magnitude and importance of the issues that we had to handle, compared to many other public sector jobs that had much less responsibility and were paid considerably more. So hired the consultant, he started putting the data down and started showing what had happened over time and compared it with both federal and state and local and comparable states. And I think that was a bit of a turning point for us because it was probably one of the first really big times where we had gone from the outside. This person, by the way, had been hired as a consultant for the legislature on numerous occasions and so was highly regarded. And so I thought he brought a degree of credibility for us. But you know what? I've come to realize, now having served as governor as well, we're going to forever have this battle. This is not a battle for one term or 1 year or one biennial budget. This will forever be a battle with us. And we just, we're never going to compete with the private sector. But, we have much more to offer than the private sector does in terms of personal growth and experience and so on. But we can't afford, now that we're doing what we're doing with regard to health care benefits and retiree benefits. And let me take you back in time. Historically, we could recruit, because I was in charge of recruitment, we could recruit because we could offer more, you come in one day and you're going to go to court the next day and you're not going to be carrying somebody's bag, okay? And you're going to fall on your face, get up, learn from it, and go back in the next day. Nobody offers that in the private sector, okay? They don't even offer trials in the private sector anymore. But anyway, the personal growth here, the opportunities, we could always win, hands down. We couldn't win on the salary front, but we did on the benefit front. We no longer win on the benefit front, okay? So, and the legislature, I came to find out, never understood that the benefit front was the reason we were able to recruit, whether it was AG's office or public service, period, better than we otherwise would have been able to do. The legislature never understood that. Instead, the rhetoric was, we shouldn't be paying anything more or better than the private sector, to which my response always was, well, then raise our salaries. If you're going to raise the cost of health care, then raise our salaries. And missed. They missed the point. So we're going to forever struggle, I think.
So, you worked on salaries, and as I recall, with some considerable success,
Right.
and then success.
Right.
What, so now you're Attorney General, and what were some of the other management initiatives that you are proud of, that you undertook while you were Attorney General?
Well, you remember, we came to understand this idea. I came to understand it when I was with the office before I became AG. This idea that if some division had a personnel issue, that we're going to have the expertise within the division, which were hit and miss, and we weren't particularly well serving our clients. So we, right off the dime, I think, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Created this division called Labor and Personnel Division, where you're going to get the best. You know, no matter what division you're in, you're going to get the best legal advice and representation you can get. And I think that was a really well thought out, way to take the
And
office.
everybody else in the office who did not want to do labor and personnel cases was very grateful to you for that.
And there's a cadre of people who loved it.
Who
Right,
loved it,
right,
yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Exactly.
As it should have been,
Yeah.
right? SG,
Solicitor General's office
Think
was
that's-
new in your administration.
right. I think that's one of the better things we did, frankly, because we upped our game when it came to all of our appellate work. Our opinions were always pretty good, but, you know, we upped our game there a little
So
bit.
what gave rise to that? Was it a concern of either yours, or did you hear concerns from the courts about the quality of advocacy, or were there models in other states, or what?
So, when I ended up arguing, I went back, arguing before the U.S. Supreme Court. I went back and I participated in a program through the National Association of Attorneys General, where they would bring in folks, and I would use it as a test and mock arguments and so on and so forth. And there I learned more about the federal structure and the Solicitor General. And there I learned there were some other states that had done it. And it looked to me to be the exact right thing for us to do. But I don't want to hide the ball here. When I came in, I interviewed a number of justices, appellate judges and so on, just to get a report card on us. And, you know, it was kind of like hit and miss for us. Some were fantastic and they looked with high regard when they walked in the courtroom. Some were not. And that's not good for the Attorney General's office, of course. That's not good for those lawyers. So out of this came an opportunity for us to up our game overall as an office, but up the game of those individuals by training them rather than just sending them in. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, when I argued a case before the United States Supreme Court as a young kid, I didn't have anything back here. I really didn't. I look back on that and I'm just kind of baffled by it all. I remember going down in the basement and watching this little video in the U.S. Supreme Court where it said less than one half of 1% of the lawyers in America ever argue a case. Think about that. But it's probably much less than that now. And all I sat there and thought, boy, I wished I didn't know that. My argument's tomorrow. And, you know, we just needed to have a higher investment in the people because they don't know what they don't know. If they haven't had a shot at it or hadn't had a tough set of questions asked of them, and the first they're going to get is from the bench, that is not fair to them.
So you had Nara Pierce as your Solicitor General, and you had a small Solicitor General's unit, and they didn't argue all the cases in the state Supreme Court, but they helped prepare the other lawyers to do that.
Right. There was a lot of jealousy. People enjoy arguing cases before the court. And so initially, remember this, y'all?
Mm-hmm.
There was this attitude of,
Yes.
oh, they're going to take all of our cases away. And that's not what we were there to do. Yes, there were some that we would take away, and with good reason. But for the most part, they were left with the attorneys. But we got those attorneys ready so that when they went in the court, they were better than they otherwise would have been.
And you had, in creating that unit, of course, you had to now finance the unit, so all the client agencies had to chip in a little bit more than they otherwise had to, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And now with the third Solicitor General we have, it's not even an issue anymore. People accept it because that's the way it's been for a long time.
Good. They don't know it was any other way.
That's
right.
So you had some other innovations during your time. I think of a couple. One was the case management system. We got to more computerized in the office.
Right.
And then also we had the Attorney General's Management Action Project.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get that right?
Accountability.
Accountability Project. That's right. Oh, gosh.
AgMap.
AgMap. So what gave rise to both of those efforts?
So AgMap was, I read a book by Rudy Giuliani, and how he had brought a new concept to the law enforcement office in New York City, which was based on data, real-time data, and real-time disbursement of human resources to address whatever problems that were out there. And I looked at it and thought, you know, this doesn't belong just to criminal justice agencies. This belongs anywhere and everywhere. If we can gather data, see where we're good, see where we're not, give ourselves some goals, step up to those challenges, you know, that's really what the whole concept was about. So created it there, created it in the governor's office, got national awards for it, and to this day I still believe it's a good way to manage. And frankly, it's a good way to manage if you're AG or governor, the legislature. The legislature will react to some news article out there, okay? And they were well-meaning, well-intentioned, want to go in there and do a piece of new legislation, right? That it's good for that one thing.
Right.
But the ramifications to everything else are not understood and far-reaching. So what we would do when they would overreact to something is bring them in the data to show that it was an anomaly. This wasn't a systematic problem. And it began to get them to be more thoughtful, I think, in how they approached issues and legislation and so on. So it had a lot of really positives associated with it.
And tied in with that was the really stepping up the computer system in the office, because now we can keep track of all this data that we had out there. And it was that I've always viewed the AgMap and the case management system, the computerized effort in the office, to really feed into each other and help us manage all the data.
Well, and the other thing we learned, right, is you can find data on about anything you want. And some of it is very telling and important and worthwhile, and some you didn't need to know about.
Right.
And so we grew really by doing that and understanding and putting the two together to understand what's the question that we want an answer to, or what's this the answer to, or what's the question to which this is the answer. We had to sort all through that, and it wasn't easy, but I do think it made us really focus on the high degree of professionalism of the office. Can I stop for just a moment? I don't want this interview to end without saying that I don't know of anyone who has served as Attorney General of the state of Washington who hasn't believed in one fundamental principle and has been driven as Attorney General by that principle, and that is that the office will be the highest professional, ethical office in the state, if not the country. And that has been our aspiration. That has been what has driven us. We've performed admirably. I'll still put the office up against any office in the country because we have that's our culture, that's who we are. Whether we're the Attorney General or a clerk typist, we all believe that's our job, to be the highest of ethics, the highest of professional offices. So all of those initiatives were intended to advance that objective.
That would have been a great finale for the whole interview. However, we have more to go. So any other management issues? You created some new divisions, centralized some litigation functions in L&P and Solicitor General's office. I also recall that at the time, some of the work, you mentioned earlier, some work that was with prosecutors and dependencies came to the Attorney General's office when you were a new attorney in Spokane. But now, during your administration, did some of the work get turned back over to agencies? Did some of that?
A little bit did. Tough financial times, okay? And here's what was happening, which I learned as governor is just a human tendency, okay? Agencies wanted more, and for that they wanted to pay less. Okay, as governor, I learned the people want more, and they want to pay less. So I think it's just a human tendency. And there was never any real thoughtful sorting through by agencies of what was real legal advice that I needed, or was I just getting my backside covered, or was I just getting stuff off my desk, or did I really need this help, or what have you. And so it was this constant demand for more, more, more. I mean, on the one hand, that's a credit to us, because they did value us. On the other hand, we didn't have that much resource to provide them. So we tried to get them to understand the difference between what is legal advice that you really need, and you're going to pay for it. And you're going to pay for it. And there came a point where they wanted real accountability, the agencies did. I'm not getting what I'm paying for. Oh, really? You're getting much more than what you're paying for, to be perfectly honest with you. And they began again with the data to see that that was true. Well, Social and Health Services was the biggest one, where they wanted to go out and get some private legal advice. And they did, and it didn't work out real well for them. But, you know, some people have to learn the hard way, and they had to learn the hard way. But, so we did it with a little bit of mixed bag, but kind of in-house counsel, kind of without the ability to go to trial or do anything. There was some of that, but I really firmly believe the Attorney General's office is the legal advisor to all of state government. Served 2 terms as governor. I still believe that, and I don't think we should change that in any way, shape, or form. But you got to have a check and balance on the clients, because they'll work the AG's office to death, because they don't pay the tab. Somebody else in their administration pays the tab. Mm-hmm. Well, then they got to learn to understand, when do I go for help and when don't I? When am I copping out and when am I really looking for help?
So you mentioned when you were a deputy attorney general that it was your personal desire and the expectation that you be a hands-on lawyer as well. Well, now you're up a couple levels. You're attorney general, and you probably still had the instinct, I want to be a hands-on lawyer, but yet you now have management of this entire office, a growing office, a bunch of external commitments. So how did you, what was your management style like then? How did that evolve from being deputy to attorney general? How did you stepped it up a couple levels, and what was your view of managing this entire office?
So I'm forever going to be a hands-on, but I've learned something about myself over a number of job changes, which is that when I first take a job, I will try and learn it as best I can, particular areas that I'm not familiar with or don't know very well. And then I will back away after I have a comfort zone that I can actually have a discussion with you about some division that I might not otherwise have had any real association with. So when I came in as AG, I did exactly that, and then backed away. And Kathy really,
Kathy Mix, who was your
chief deputy, really ran the place.
And for virtually all 12 years.
Correct. And that's my style, because I think it's incumbent on me to understand the office, not just parts of the office that I might have been earlier affiliated with. So that's why I went vertical and then stepped back, and she ran the office. And I still wanted to practice law, and so I found ways that I still could practice law.
Thanks for listening to this AGO moment in history. Be sure to like and subscribe to receive updates when we upload a new episode. On our next episode, Governor Gregoire talks about her policy initiatives as Attorney General, particularly initiatives for protecting vulnerable Washingtonians, including her decision to file a suit against the tobacco industry. Thanks, and talk to you again soon.